Hi Year 3, this is your Friday comprehension session, and this is the more independent poetry comprehension lesson. So if you haven't looked at yesterday's video, which was about scissors in the classroom, then I'd like you to stop this video now and have a look at that first, and then come back and have a look at this. So today's poem that you're going to be looking at is called New School. And I'm going to zoom out just so that you can pause the video now and have a read of it independently. So if you could do that now for me and then come back to the video. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to read it through for you, and if you could follow along, that would be great. So yesterday we discussed about our verses that we have in our poems rather than paragraphs, and we also looked at rhyming couplets. So if you can remember, in yesterday's session, at the end of some of the lines, there were some words that had similar sounds, and they were rhyming couplets. Let's have a read of the first verse and see if there's any rhyming couplets in this one. New School by Kevin McCann. In the playground corner, I stand and see girls with skipping ropes, boys with footballs, and everyone shouts at once. Pause the video. Were there any rhyming couplets there? So were there any words at the end of the lines that had similar sounds? Okay, so the end of my lines was corner, see, ropes, footballs, and once. None of those have similar ending sounds. Let's have a look at our second verse. In the playground corner, I stand and see a teacher looking at his watch, cup of coffee in one hand and a whistle in the other. Were there any rhyming couplets in that verse? Pause the video and have a think. Corner, see, watch, hand, other. No rhyming sounds there either. Now, if you can remember yesterday's video, I said that only some poems have rhyming couplets. Not all poems have to rhyme. This is still a poem, but it doesn't have to rhyme. There is something, though, that's the same. What is the same in the first verse as in the second verse? I'd like you to have another read of those two verses and tell me what's the same about them. Pause the video now and have a read of it yourself. Okay. In the playground corner, I stand and see girls with skipping ropes, boys with footballs, and everyone shouts at once. In the playground corner, I stand and see a teacher looking at his watch, cup of coffee in one hand, and a whistle in the other. If you look carefully at the beginning of each verse, it says, in the playground corner, I stand and see, colon. In the playground corner, I stand and see, colon. Interesting. I wonder if that's going to be the same all the way down, but that's something that some poems do have. They have repetition, which can help with the rhythm of how you read the poem. So it creates a beat of how you would read it. And it also creates a pattern in the verses. Let's carry on with our next verse. In the playground corner, I stand and see big kids sharing jokes and sweets. One skits our headmaster, and everyone knows everyone else. In the playground corner, I stand on my own and wish I could just go home. There's a picture there, and I think this person here is the one who's standing on their own in the playground. Okay, let's have a look at our questions. So remember, like I've said, this one's going to be a bit more independent than your session from yesterday. So I'm going to zoom out so that you can pause the video. So here are your questions for today's poem. So you pause the video now, you can have a look at them. Okay, and I'm now going to just zoom in for you in case you need to have a closer look, so you can have a look at question 1 to 7. If that would move, but it didn't move, so I'll move up a little bit. And then I'm going to move down for you to see the last few questions. Okay, so they are our questions for today. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the questions for you and give you a couple of little tips, but then I'm going to ask you to try and work through this by yourself. And then your class teacher will look on Tapestry to see how you've done from it. Let's have a look at the questions. Question 1. Who is I in this poem? So a bit like our poem from yesterday when we had the teacher was telling the poem, who is saying the words in this poem? Now we know Kevin McCann wrote the poem, he's the poet, but in his imagination, who is the person that says I? I stand and see. I stand on my own. Who's a person that is saying the poem? Who is I in this poem? Okay, question 2. List 3 things you know are in the playground in the poem, apart from the children and the teacher. So looking for 3 things that you know are in the playground. Now, be careful. That doesn't mean look at the picture and see that there's a basketball net or a netball net. We're looking at the poem. So ignoring that picture, don't let that sway you. Have a look at what it says in the writing. So have a look carefully and see if there's anything that children are using to play with, and see if that will help you. Because it doesn't say anywhere in our poem that I could see anything about a basketball net or a netball net. So if you write that down, it won't be the answer. Okay, so you need 3 things there. How do you know what time of day it is? So think about what they're doing. What time of day is it going to be for them to be doing that? Question 4, one skits our headmaster, and that's in quotation marks, which means you need to find that exact line in your poem. And it says, suggest another way the poet could have said the same thing. The word is skits. Now, I want you to have a think what you think the word skits means. If you're not sure, I'd like you to look it up, if in a dictionary if you have one, online if you're able to, or ask an adult to have a look for you. What does skit mean? And suggest another way the poet could have said the same thing. Or, if you're able to, if you use the content of the poem, you could try and work out what skit means. Big kids sharing jokes and sweets, one skits our headmaster. So you can try and work out what you think it could mean from that content. Question 5, and everyone knows everyone else. Again, we've got quotation marks. You define that line in your poem to help you. So you can skim the text to find that line. Why do you think the narrator included this information? The narrator is the poet, is the person who's saying the poem, sorry, not the poet. So it's the person who is saying the things in the story. Why do you think the narrator included this information? And everyone knows everyone else. Is he maybe feeling a bit sad that he doesn't know everyone else? Have a think about that. Read the title of the poem. Is this a good title for the poem? Now, you can't really get this question wrong. As long as you give a good reason, I don't mind if your answer is yes or no. So the poem is called New School. You need to decide whether you think this is a good title or a bad title and explain your answer. Now, as long as you give a reason to explain why you've ticked that box, you can't get that one wrong. So think about that one carefully. Question 7. What is the effect of starting most of the verses with the same 2 lines? Now, I gave you some answers to this question earlier on. We had repetition in our 2 lines, the first 2 lines of some of our verses. What is the effect of starting most of the verses with those lines? Have a think of that. Question 8. Do you think the playground seems like a happy place for most of the children? Now be careful, it says for most of the children. It doesn't mean all of them, the majority. So if there's 10 children on the playground and 7 or 8 of them were enjoying themselves, were having a nice time, then maybe it'd be a happy place for most of the children. You've got to think about it carefully and explain your answer. Again, don't use the picture necessarily to help you. Have a think about the last verse. I think will help you with that one. And how does the poet want you to feel about the narrator? Explain your answer. So the narrator is the person who's saying the words in the poem. How does it make you feel about them? Does it make you feel happy for them and you're pleased for them? Does it make you feel sad for them or sorry for them? Have a think and explain your answer carefully, because that's worth 2 marks. So your first mark will be how it makes you feel about how the poet makes you feel about the narrator. And then when you explain your answer, you'd get another mark. So make sure you fit in both of those for me. Okay, they're all the tips I'm going to give you for this poem. I want you to work through it really carefully and read through the questions carefully. And then if you put it onto Tapestry, your class teacher will have a look and give you any feedback that you need, or answer any questions if you're unsure of anything. Good luck and have a lovely weekend. Bye.